when he smashed her phone against the wall. The sound of the phone hitting the wall was louder than it should have been. It cracked through the dining room like a gunshot. For one strange second, everything in the Dlamini house froze. The low music playing from the speaker seemed to fade into the background. The spoons stopped clinking. A glass paused halfway to someone's lips. Even the smell of roasted meat, warm bread, and spiced tea seemed to hang still in the air. Amahle's phone struck the white wall beside the dining table and shattered on impact. The screen burst into glittering fragments across the polished floor. Kwame Dlamini stood there, breathing hard, his jaw locked, his hands still half raised from the throw. His mother, Mama Zola Dlamini, lifted her eyes only once. His cousin Tabo, who had been leaning lazily against the doorway, straightened. An aunt near the far end of the table blinked, then quietly lowered her gaze. No one said a word, because everyone in that room thought they knew what would happen next. They thought Amahle would do what she had always done. They thought she would bend down, pick up the shattered pieces, try to calm him, try to explain, say she was only calling her sister, say it was a misunderstanding, say she had done nothing wrong, or maybe say sorry anyway, just to make the moment pass. That was how these things usually worked in families like this. The woman softened. The room looked away. The man regained control. And by dessert, people were laughing again as if nothing had happened. But Amahle did not bend. She did not kneel on the floor. She did not look at the broken phone. She did not wipe her tears because there were no tears. She did not defend herself. She stood absolutely still. Then, with one calm movement, she touched the small turquoise ring on her finger and straightened her back. There was something in that silence that unsettled the room. It was not weakness. It was not shock. It was not surrender. It was the silence of someone who had already made a decision. Kwame did not understand it yet. He thought he had just destroyed a phone. He had no idea he had destroyed the last safe version of himself. Because before he grabbed it from her hand, before it hit the wall, the call had already connected. And on the other end, listening to every word, every sound, every crack of fear and control in that room, was Tendine Cube. Every Friday, the Dlamini house smelled exactly the same. Fresh herbs, spiced tea, warm bread, clean linen, and Mama Zola's expensive perfume, the one she wore only when guests arrived. She used to say that a blessed house must have a recognizable scent. A home should welcome people before you even open your mouth, she often said. And the house did. People stepped through those doors and thought they were entering a place built on order, respect, and love. The furniture was polished. The curtains were always drawn just right. The glasses matched. The silver gleamed. The family pictures on the wall showed weddings, graduations, babies, and Sunday smiles. Everything about the Dlamini home suggested stability. It looked like the kind of place where elders were honored, children were protected, and marriages were sacred. For years, people believed that. Amahle believed it too. When she married Kwame 7 years earlier, she had not married into chaos. She had married into presentation. And presentation, she later learned, could be stronger than truth. In the beginning, she admired Mama Zola. The woman moved through her house like a queen who never had to question her place. She cooked with authority, spoke with precision, corrected people with a smile thin enough to pass for politeness. And when visitors praised her sons or her home, she accepted it as if it were simply proper recognition. Amahle had tried very hard to belong there. She came with food. She helped in the kitchen. She smiled at the right times, laughed when the room wanted laughter, spoke gently, never interrupted, never competed, never challenged Mama Zola in front of others. Over time, she made herself smaller, softer, quieter, not because that was who she was, but because that was the shape that fit best in the Dlamini house. At first, she told herself it was love. Then she told herself it was respect. Then maturity. Then marriage. But much later, when she allowed herself to be honest, she realized it had been survival. People outside the family liked Kwame. He knew how to speak in a room. He knew how to shake hands, how to laugh at the right moment, how to sound thoughtful, how to seem dependable. He was successful enough to impress people and restrained enough to make them call him disciplined. He never looked wild, never sloppy, never obviously cruel. That was part of what made him dangerous. Men like Kwame do not always come with visible storms. Sometimes they come polished, measured, well-dressed, soft-spoken, and because they do not always shout, people call them calm. Because they do not always hit, people call them controlled. Because they know how to smile in public, people assume they are safe in private. But Amahle learned slowly, too slowly, that some people live with more than one face. One face for the world, one face for the family, and a third face that appears only when they're sure you have nowhere left to go. At first, Kwame's control disguised itself as concern. Don't wear that to my mother's place. People notice too much. You don't need to tell your family every little thing. Why are you always calling someone? Can't you sit with yourself? I'm just trying to protect our marriage. You're too emotional. Think before you react. If she was quiet, he called her distant. If she spoke up, he called her dramatic. If she disagreed, he said she misunderstood him. If she cried, he said she was manipulating him. He rarely needed to scream. He had discovered something far more effective than rage. He had mastered humiliation in a low voice. A quiet insult in front of relatives. A dismissive glance. A private correction after guests left. A hand gripping too hard at the wrist. A sentence dropped so softly no one else could challenge it. That was his method. Not enough for the world to label him dangerous. Just enough to make Amahle question her own reality. And the worst part of that kind of cruelty is not the pain. It is the confusion. Because if someone hurts you loudly, you know what happened. But when someone wounds you, in careful, deniable ways, you start living in doubt. Maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe he didn't mean it that way. Maybe I'm tired. Maybe this is normal. Maybe all marriages have this. Maybe I should try harder. That is how strong women disappear. Not all at once, but in portions. A little voice here, a little certainty there, until one day they're still standing in the room, but no longer fully present inside themselves. That Friday had started like every other Friday. Cars filled the driveway. Music played softly in the background. Plates were arranged with impossible symmetry. The kitchen was bright with steam and spice. Amahle had cooked most of the meal herself. She had woken early that morning and worked carefully, measuring flavors by instinct, tasting sauces with patience, setting things aside in warm dishes so everything would be ready at the right time. She no longer cooked to impress Mama Zola. She knew better than that. She cooked because she refused to let bitterness touch everything she made. Even when life felt ugly, her hands still believed in beauty. She placed one final dish on the kitchen counter. Mama Zola glanced at it and, without turning fully, said, "I hope the salt is right this time." Two women nearby heard it. One froze. The other looked away. Amahle smiled softly. "Of course," she said. "You'll see." Then she sat down. That was how it always began. A small remark. A tiny public cut. A sentence light enough to deny, sharp enough to wound. And because it was never dramatic, no one challenged it. If someone did, Mama Zola could always laugh and say, "Oh, please, we were only talking." But that was the genius of cruelty dressed as refinement. It left no fingerprints, only bruises. Over the years, the comments had changed shape, but never intention. You're still learning our ways. Some women are raised differently. A good wife knows how to hold a home together without making noise. There are women who enter a family, and women who truly become part of one. Every sentence looked harmless from the outside, but Amahle knew what they really meant. You're still being measured. You are still not enough. You are still here on our terms. For 7 years, she absorbed it, smiled through it, adjusted around it. But pressure does not disappear just because it is silent. It gathers, like water behind stone, like heat beneath dry earth, until the day something finally cracks. The call she had delayed too long. By the time everyone was seated that evening, Amahle already knew this would not be an ordinary night. There was something restless in Kwame. He laughed too loudly at his cousin's jokes, interrupted people more than usual, kept checking his watch. And every time Amahle spoke to someone across the table, she felt his eyes on her. Not curious, not affectionate, measuring, tracking, warning. She had learned to read the temperature of his moods long before they reached the boil. A louder laugh from Kwame was never just laughter. It usually meant he needed an audience. And when Kwame had an audience, he liked performances. Amahle waited until the plates were mostly empty and people had settled into the loose comfort of after-dinner conversation. Then she stood. "I'll be back in a minute," she said calmly. No one stopped her. Why would they? To them, she was only stepping away. But Amahle was not going to cry. She was not going to wash her face and rehearse another smile. She was going to breathe and make a call she had postponed all day. She walked down the short hallway toward the side room near the veranda, where the noise from the dining room softened just enough for privacy. Her fingers trembled only once as she reached in her dress pocket and pulled out her phone. She unlocked it, scrolled, stopped a name, Tendine Cube. For a second, she stared at it. Tenai was not family. He was better than family. He was precise, quiet, reliable. A man who did not waste words and did not confuse calm with cowardice. He had once told her, months earlier, when the truth finally matters, make sure you have more than tears. She hit call. One ring, then two. Before the third ring finished, his voice came through the speaker. "Hello, Amahle?" And then, footsteps behind her. Fast, sharp, familiar. Before she could turn fully, Kwame's hand closed around her wrist. "What are you doing?" He snatched the phone from her hand. Amahle did not scream. Kwame. But it was too late. He looked at the screen, saw the active call, and something dark passed over his face. Then he turned and hurled the phone. It hit the wall and shattered. The silence afterward was worse than the sound. Kwame stood over the broken pieces, chest rising and falling, but when he spoke, his voice was low. "Who were you calling?" Amahle said nothing. He stepped closer. "Who were you calling?" he repeated. "Your sister? Your cousin? A friend?" Still she did not answer. The family had gathered near enough now to witness without intervening. Mama Zola stood near the doorway, arms folded. Tabo lingered behind her with a lazy half-smile of someone who enjoys scenes that do not belong to him. A few others stayed seated, pretending distance made them innocent. Kwame nudged a shard of glass with the tip of his shoe. Then he leaned in just enough for everyone to hear. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "No one is taking you out of this house." He paused. "And no one is coming for you either." A few people let out the kind of uncomfortable little laugh that cowards use to protect themselves from choosing a side. Just enough laughter to make him feel backed. Just enough silence to make her feel alone. That was supposed to be the moment she broke. That was the script. If Amahle had cried, the tension would have loosened. Someone would have handed her tissues. Someone else might have said, "Kwame, calm down." Mama Zola would have sighed and complained about women embarrassing themselves. And by the end of the night, everyone would have found a way to call it unfortunate instead of unforgivable. But Amahle did not cry. She looked at him with a stillness that unsettled him. Not defiance, not fear, not pleading, recognition, as if she were finally seeing him clearly enough to stop being surprised by him. Tabo's smile faded first. Then Mama Zola shifted her weight. Kwame frowned. Because men like him can tolerate tears. They know how to use tears. What they fear is decision. And there was something in Amahle's silence that said the decision had already been made. The truth was, the story did not begin with the shattered phone. It had begun months earlier. On a Tuesday afternoon that should have meant nothing. Amahle had been looking for a document on Kwame's laptop. Something ordinary. Something about a payment schedule he had asked her to print. He was in the shower. She did not intend to search him. She did not need drama. She was tired of drama. But then a message notification appeared in the corner of the screen. One line. That was all. Keep it my mother's name. Amahle won't understand. She stared at it. For a second, the world narrowed. Not because the sentence confirmed something she had already feared, but because of how casually it was written. As if deception had become routine. As if she were not a wife, not a partner, not even a person worth explaining things to, but simply an obstacle to be managed. Her hands remained steady. That surprised her. She clicked nothing. Waited. Then, slowly, carefully, she opened the messages. What she found was not a misunderstanding. It was architecture. Transfers. Discussions about money moved quietly. References to a second property. Plans. Lies. And at the center of it all, another name. Zinel. Amahle did not scream. Did not confront him. Did not throw the laptop. did not collapse, because somewhere deep inside her, something cold and clear had woken up. For the first time in years, she stopped reacting and started recording. She photographed messages, copied account details, sent documents to a secure address, saved dates, saved names, saved proof. She learned about the apartment, a hidden place paid for through complicated transfers and tucked under Mama Zola's legal ownership. She learned that the other woman had been around far longer than she had imagined. She learned that lies do not only live in bedrooms. They live in paperwork, in signatures, in property records, in the confidence of people who believe they will never be questioned. When she finally told Tendai what she had found, he listened without interrupting. Then he said only one thing. Don't react. Build your case. That sentence changed her life. Don't react. Build your case. Not because she wanted revenge, but because she finally understood something devastating. Truth without evidence is often treated like emotion, and emotion, in families like the Dlaminis, is always assigned to the woman. So she became patient, careful, methodical. She smiled when she had to, attended dinners, folded napkins, served tea, and quietly gathered the pieces that would one day become a blade. There's a kind of silence that is not surrender. It is preparation. Amahle entered that silence slowly. She stopped pleading with Kwame to explain where he had been, stopped asking why money had moved, stopped hoping Mama Zola would someday choose fairness over loyalty, stopped believing that if she behaved perfectly, she would finally be treated gently. That hope was the last thing she buried. After that, she became strategic. She opened a private bank account. She moved small amounts of money when she could do so safely. She made copies of marriage records, property references, tax paperwork, bank transfers, voice notes. She began meeting Tendai quietly, never in obvious places, never with drama. A cafe once, a parked car near a legal office another time, a discreet walk through a public garden on a Sunday afternoon where nobody looked twice at two adults discussing documents. Tendai was not sentimental. That helped. He never told her to be strong, as if strength were a mood. He told her what mattered. This transfer links him. This document matters because of the date. If the property is hidden under his mother's name, we need proof of beneficial ownership. Do not confront him before the filing. Do not warn them. Each instruction gave her back a little of herself. Because when someone has spent years making you feel powerless, the smallest act of clear planning can feel like breathing again. Still, some nights were hard, harder than she admitted. She would lie beside Kwame and stare into the dark, listening to the even rhythm of the man who had betrayed her and still slept peacefully. There were nights she wanted to wake him and scream. Tell him she knew. Tell him she had seen the messages, the transfers, the apartment, the lies in his mother's name. But every time anger rose, she remembered the same thing. If she exploded too soon, they would turn her into the problem. So she waited, and while she waited, she changed. Not dramatically, not visibly, but inside, the woman who used to hope for tenderness was disappearing. In her place stood someone quieter, stronger, more dangerous, because this new Amahle no longer needed him to confess. She only needed the truth to stand in the light. The event had been planned for weeks. A large family celebration in a hired hall. Bright lights, draped fabric, waiters moving between tables, soft music, speeches, photographs, the kind of occasion Mama Zola loved. A room full of witnesses dressed as celebration. Kwame looked relaxed that evening. Too relaxed. Amahle noticed at the moment they entered. He had the careless confidence of a man who believed the future was still his. He greeted relatives, shook hands, laughed with Tabo, checked his cufflinks in the reflection of a glass panel, placed a hand on Amahle's back now and then, just enough for people to see a husband guiding his wife. She led him. She wore a deep emerald dress that made her look composed and untouchable. No one in the room knew she had filed for divorce 2 weeks earlier. No one except Tendai. Everything had been timed carefully. The papers, the records, the financial trail, the supporting evidence. This event was not the legal beginning. That had already happened. This was the end of performance. Amahle moved through the evening with astonishing calm. She greeted people, accepted compliments, smiled for photographs, even sat beside Mama Zola for part of the meal and listened to her speak about family legacy as if the word itself had not been used for years to cover rot. At one point, Kwame leaned toward her and said quietly, "You've been very quiet lately." Amahle turned and met his eyes. "Yes," she said, "I've been learning." He smirked, not understanding. That was the thing about men who underestimate women. Sometimes they hear a warning and mistake it for obedience. Later in the evening, after the meal, as people settled in for the usual speeches, Amahle rose from her chair. Some assumed she was going to say something ceremonial. Maybe thank the family. Maybe toast the elders. Maybe praise Mama Zola. She walked toward the small stage with measured steps. No hurry. No trembling. The room quieted politely. Kwame watched with mild curiosity. Mama Zola adjusted in her seat, prepared to receive whatever public respect she believed was naturally due to her. Amahle took the microphone. For a moment, she said nothing. She let the room settle. Let every eye find her. Then she spoke. "I won't take long." Her voice was calm, clear, and steady enough to cut through every whisper. "There are times when silence protects peace," she said. "And there are times when silence protects lies." The room changed. Not loudly, but palpably. People straightened. A few exchanged glances. Kwame's expression hardened, just slightly. Amahle continued. "For a long time, I believed that keeping quiet made me wise. I believed endurance made me honorable. I believed if I loved carefully enough, respected deeply enough, and stayed patient long enough, truth would eventually be met with truth." She paused. It was not. Kwame stood halfway. "Amahle." She lifted one hand. Not dramatically, just enough. At the same moment, a signal was given from the back of the hall, and the large screen behind the stage came alive. The first image appeared. A bank transfer. Then another. Then a property document. Then a legal record. Then message screenshots. Then names. Dates. Amounts. Proof. The room went dead still. You could almost hear people stop breathing. Kwame went pale. Mama Zola rose to her feet so quickly her chair scraped the floor. "What is this nonsense?" she snapped. Amahle turned to look at her. Her face did not move. "This is not nonsense," she said evenly. "It is record." A ripple ran through the room. Tabo stared at the screen, the smirk gone from his face now, replaced by the uneasy blankness of someone who suddenly wished he were invisible. Kwame found his voice. "Turn that off." No one moved. "Turn that off now." Amahle looked at him, and for the first time in years, there was no trace of fear in her eyes. Then she said the words that finished breaking the room. "There's more." And then the audio began. At first, there was static. Then footsteps. Then the unmistakable sound of a struggle. Then the crack of a phone smashing against a wall. A woman in the audience gasped. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Then Kwame's voice filled the hall. Cold. Controlled. Familiar. "Who were you calling?" Silence. Then again. "Who were you calling?" "Your family?" "A friend." More silence. And then the line. The same line he had spoken so confidently in front of the family. The same line he had used like a lock. "No one is taking you out of this house. And no one is coming for you either." The words echoed through the hall with a violence greater than shouting. Because now they were not protected by the smallness of a dining room. Now they belonged to witnesses. Real witnesses. Not relatives who could look away. Not guests who could pretend they had misunderstood. Witnesses. The audio ended. No one clapped. No one moved. No one knew what expression was safe anymore. Kwame looked around the room, and for the first time in his life, realized he was not controlling the narrative. Mama Zola's face had gone stiff with a fury so deep it had temporarily silenced her. Amahle stood at the front of the room, one hand resting lightly against the microphone stand. Not shaking, not crying, just standing in the truth. Then she said quietly, "I'm not here to embarrass anyone." She let the sentence settle. "I am here because silence should not be used to protect betrayal. It should not be used to protect theft. It should not be used to protect humiliation." Kwame took a step forward. "You are making a mistake." "No," Amahle said. "I made mistakes before. This is correction. A murmur moved through the crowd, and then she delivered the final blow. I filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. Sometimes people expect dramatic revenge to look loud. They expect screaming, throwing things, security dragging people out, wild tears, public collapse. But real endings are often quieter than that. They are devastating not because they are loud, but because they are certain. Kwame stared at her. Not angry now. Not at first. Stunned. Like a man watching the ground give way beneath him in slow motion. You what? Amahle did not repeat herself. She did not need to. Tendai stepped forward from the side of the hall then. Not as a hero, not as a savior, but as a witness with documents already in motion. Kwame saw him and understood too late. This had not been an emotional outburst. This had been prepared, measured, filed, built. Mama Zola recovered enough to speak. You ungrateful girl, she hissed. After everything this family has done for you. Amahle turned toward her. What this family did, she said, was mistake my silence for permission. No one interrupted her, because something in the room had shifted. Not everyone was on her side. Families like these do not transform that quickly. But the old balance had cracked. The performance had failed. And once truth has been spoken in front of enough people, it becomes harder to push back into darkness. Kwame tried one last tactic. He lowered his voice. The same voice he used when he wanted to sound reasonable. This is private. We can handle this at home. Amahle looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, that house was where you hid it. This room is where I ended it. The hall was still silent when Amahle stepped away from the microphone. No applause followed. Truth does not always arrive to applause. Sometimes it arrives to stunned stillness. Sometimes it forces people to examine themselves before they dare react. She walked down from the stage, slowly, past relatives who had once watched her shrink, past women who had heard the little insults and chosen silence, past men who had laughed softly when Kwame wanted support, past Mama Zola, who looked smaller now than she ever had in her own house, past Kwame, who moved as if to stop her but did not, because for the first time, he understood what power actually looks like when it leaves. It does not argue. It does not beg. It does not explain itself twice. It simply goes. Amahle walked toward the doors. With every step, the weight in her chest changed shape. Not disappeared. Freedom is not that simple. Pain does not vanish just because truth wins the room. Betrayal still hurts. Humiliation still leaves scars. 7 years do not collapse into one easy breath. But there was something else in her now. Space. Space where fear had lived. Space where self-doubt had ruled. Space where performance had been required. Outside, the night air touched her skin like water after fire. She stopped beneath the lights near the entrance and closed her eyes for a second. Not because she was weak, because she was finally allowed to feel the full weight of what had ended. A car door opened behind her. Tendai approached quietly. He did not ask if she was all right. People ask that question when they want a simple answer. Instead, he said, "It's done." Amahle opened her eyes. No, not done, but begun. Still, she nodded, because some endings are really beginnings wearing grief. People would later say that the night Kwame smashed Amahle's phone was the moment everything changed. But that was not fully true. The truth is, everything had already changed long before that night. The messages had changed it. The secrets had changed it. The hidden apartment had changed it. The money moved behind her back had changed it. The mother who protected lies had changed it. The family that watched and stayed comfortable had changed it. What Kwame broke that night was not just a phone. He broke the last illusion Amahle had been living inside. The last fragile idea that maybe she could still survive by being patient. The last false hope that dignity could be negotiated with people committed to taking it from her. The phone shattered, but so did the final lie. And once that lie was gone, Amahle became dangerous in the only way that truly matters. She became clear. Not every woman announces her breaking point. Not every woman raises her voice when she reaches the end. Some women go quiet, so quiet that people mistake them for defeated. But there's a kind of silence that hides strategy, a kind of silence that is taking notes, that is saving screenshots, that is memorizing dates, that is learning laws, That is opening accounts. That is documenting patterns. That is turning pain into proof. Those women are often underestimated, right, until the moment they move. And when they do move, it is rarely impulsive. It is precise. They do not always win because they were louder. They win because they stopped wasting energy trying to be believed by people invested in doubting them. Amahle learned that. The hard way, the expensive way, the lonely way. But she learned it. And because she learned it, she walked away with something Kwame never understood the value of. Not revenge, not performance, not even vindication. She walked away with herself. The next morning, the Dlamini family woke into the aftermath of exposure. Phones buzzed early. Messages spread quietly through cousins, church circles, business contacts, neighbors, relatives who had not even attended the event but somehow knew by sunrise that something irreversible had happened. People asked questions in hushed voices. Some pretended concern while searching for details. Some condemned the public nature of the truth more than the truth itself. Some blamed Amahle for timing. Some blamed Kwame for carelessness. Some blamed no one, because neutrality feels respectable to people who benefit from silence. Mama Zola spent the morning making calls, trying to contain, trying to reframe, trying to pull dignity back over a situation that had already outgrown her hands. Kwame, on the other hand, did what men like him often do when exposure finally arrives. First, he denied. Then he minimized. Then he blamed. Then he tried to negotiate. He sent messages Amahle never answered. We can discuss this privately. You misunderstood a lot. My mother is devastated. Why would you do this in front of everyone? Call me. But the most revealing message came later. Not an apology. Not remorse. Only this. You didn't have to destroy everything. Amahle stared at the screen for a long moment before deleting it. Because even then, even after all of it, he still believed she had destroyed something that belonged to him. He did not understand that she had only exposed what he had already ruined. Healing did not come overnight. That part matters. Stories often end when the woman walks away, but real life begins there. Amahle had to find a place that felt like hers. A place where every object did not carry the memory of being watched. A place where silence did not feel like danger. A place where she could drink tea without bracing for criticism. She had to learn ordinary freedom again. What it felt like to answer her own phone without tension. To leave the house without explanation. To cook only if she wanted. To sit in a room and not monitor another person's mood. She had to remember her own voice. At first, that was harder than expected. Because when someone has trained you for years to reduce yourself, even freedom can feel unfamiliar. But slowly life returned. Not the old life. Something better. Truer. She laughed differently. Not carefully, but fully. She slept more deeply. She spoke to her sister for as long as she wanted. She wore colors Kwame used to call too loud. She chose quiet because she liked it, not because she feared what noise might bring. And on certain mornings, when the light entered her new space just right, she would look at her reflection and catch sight of a woman who no longer seemed half absent from her own life. That woman had paid dearly for clarity, but she had it, and clarity, once earned, is almost impossible to steal back. There are families that survive on love, and there are families that survive on silence. The most dangerous thing Amahle ever did was learn the difference. Because once she saw that peace in the Dlamini house had never been peace, only carefully managed control, she stopped mourning the loss of it. You cannot lose what never truly existed. That house had smelled like herbs, tea, warm bread, and expensive perfume. It had smelled like blessing. But sin is not truth. A beautiful room can still hide cruelty. A polished table can still host humiliation. A respected mother can still protect injustice. A well-dressed husband can still be a coward in private. And the woman everyone thought was weak, she can become the one person brave enough to end the lie. So yes, Kwame smashed her phone against the wall. Yes, the room went silent. Yes, everyone expected Amahle to crumble. But they were wrong, because by the time that phone shattered, she had already begun building the woman who would walk away from all of them. And when she finally did, she did not leave broken. She left awake.